Hi, my name is Lise Deshautel. I'm a co-founder of the Knowledge Network on Climate Assemblies, KNOCA. I also worked as an advisor on the French Climate Assembly that happened in 2019-2020. Citizens need to be involved in climate policies because climate policies today are about choices that have very much to do with every aspect of our life, the way we move, the way we eat, the way we work, what kind of work we do, etc. And we're seeing that we're in a situation where the way our societies are built, are organized, is not fit for the world that is expecting us with way more than 1.5 global warming at the world level. And in Europe, in Italy, in France, in many countries, we also have to do our share of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So because we need to adapt and because we need to attenuate climate change, choices are to be made, but those choices cannot be made without having people in the room. They cannot be confiscated. Citizen participation is one way to try to bring them in the room. The first lesson probably of the French Climate Assembly was the interest of citizens and the sense of responsibility they had when their government called upon them to come and work for 9 months. And that was a long time, long hours, many discussions that happened, and mobilization that was outstanding on their part. But it's also about the quality of the proposals that were made and that were acknowledged by a great number of actors in France and also internationally. And I would say that probably also the last one is maybe hopeful in those times of crisis, is the fact that dedicating time, resources, and allowing collective intelligence to express itself can give us ways out of those crises. I believe it's important to have national climate assemblies or any participation processes, because the national level is today a level where a lot of power and decision-making on climate policies is happening or not happening. It doesn't mean that we don't need European or local climate assemblies. Those can happen because there are rooms for maneuver, for action at those levels. But today we see that in Europe, especially the European capitals, are the one with the hand on the button for action on transports, on the distribution of money, on banning some products or trying to change the habits or the comportments of everyday citizens, of private companies, etc. And there is no coincidence that most of the lobbying or the interests of groups that are today not caring at all about climate are doing their work, most of their work, at the national level. The best ways to engage citizens in deliberative processes and participative processes, I'm not sure I have the answer to that question. It depends a lot on the context, and I think it's important that it's not only about a top-down decision, let's make a climate assembly happen. It's about the social demand. Where is the social conflict? What is being discussed? What do people want or feel that we should be discussing? In France recently we've had a new interesting process that decided to focus on one issue while the public debate was happening on another, with some people saying that they wanted to have a citizens' assembly rather on that discussion. Not saying that they didn't want the citizens' assembly on the other issue that was assisted dying, but pointing at the fact that the urgency and where they felt they were being left out of the decision-making process was actually on the other social issue. So I think it's important that we engage citizens on what they believe are important issues where there is actually social conflict, because the interest of citizen participation is not to discuss the color of where you're going to plant a tree, or how you want the garbage bin to be colored in your city. You can actually, if they want and if they're willing to, discuss about that. But if you're doing that to avoid discussing the fact that on the other side there is a big air pollution problem, I think it's a responsibility of policymakers to be vigilant and to be listening to that when they consider setting up deliberative processes. The shift from I to we occurs several times during a process, I think, but it happens on the first session when you don't know what you've signed for, and you come up and you realize that there are other people feeling the same way. They are just like, we said yes, but what's going to happen? And this generates a first community. But then it's also really in the work that you can see that shift, because the principle of a citizens' assembly is to bring the expertise of everyone, the experience of everyone. It's not about everybody is an expert. You also bring in people with specific knowledge, but it's about everybody's experience and their situation. And when you discuss, for instance, a change in the housing system because you want to renovate buildings, it's interesting to have in the room someone who is an owner, someone who is renting, and the moment where they share their experience and how a change could affect them, and where at the end they agree or they come up with a proposal where they feel like both of them would agree, even though they have different experiences or different situations. It's about compromise. It's also about someone acknowledging that maybe on that one he could lose a bit, it's not in his interest, but understanding that maybe someone else's interest is more important, or, as we say sometimes, the greater good. So I think it happens there, but it also affects, and I can testify it firsthand on that, it can also happen on the side of the organizers at some point, that it's bigger than just you, but it's about a group of people trying to work, and this is a very interesting experience that I wish for people who are planning to organize those processes can live as well. I am not sure we should try to persuade people to come and participate. I think it's also about the relevance of what policymakers offer or propose to citizens. And maybe one problem about participation in Europe is maybe that we are trying to ask the citizens to contribute where they have little interest or they don't want to, because we're avoiding sometimes big social issues. I also think that it should be the right of everyone to participate in decision making. But once you've established this very nice ideal, we need to work, and there is a lot more work that needs to be done to find ways to do that. And what's interesting is today with the climate question, we see that people try to experiment, and I'm quite glad that we get to see that in various parts of Europe at various levels with different groups of people. I think there is an interest in trying to convince more or make policymakers more aware that there is this trend, that they can contribute to it, and some of them do already. But some of them seem to be still a bit blind to that, and to consider that election remains the key element of our democracies. I think this is being questioned, and I think that citizen participation will play a big role, I hope, in the future, not in a too controlled way, but also something coming from what they say is the basis.